doom of being trapped inside a facility with no clear explanation is a tried and true premise that I can't help but enjoy every time I see it. And Root Double, Before Crime After Days, happens to use these themes as a foundation for an excellent sci-fi mystery. Written by Takumi Nakazawa of Ever 17 fame, this phenomenal piece of fiction finds its way to Switch, but still prioritizes its main story to the point that it can hinder one experiences with its work.
いいよ別に。
さっきからエナ先生の方チラッチラ見てんじゃないよ。
Root Double Before Crime After Days' narrative drastically changes throughout the game. The story focuses on a few different perspectives that completely alters how the premise is viewed. Set in the year 2030 in Rokume City, on September 16th, the nuclear facility Labo undergoes a nuclear meltdown, and to prevent leakage, the factory shuts down its doors. Unfortunately, the safety mechanism puts our cast of characters at risk of death due to excessive exposure. They're trapped inside, but the story is much more than just an escape story. Several elements that give Root Double its own unique identity include psychic powers, unreliable narrators, and a mysterious setting that features a future world that is drastically diverged from our own current world line. In particular, the mystery is handled well and it adds so much to one's engagement and experience with the game. This premise works exceedingly well with its core foundation that also manages to be incredibly flexible. Root Double is ambitious with its story. It tries to play around with unreliable narration, it deals with the nature of society and racism, it questions what it fully means to be human, it deals with people on the brink of insanity, it goes through the nature of trusting others, and more. This may leave you feeling overwhelmed, but every idea it tries to float around is integrated well, with a good example being the Census sympathy system, which essentially integrates trust into granular controls for the decision-making process. Root Double is primarily based on mystery and tension. It utilizes its medium to its fullest potential, implementing perspective in a way that is basically impossible to achieve in other mediums. There's an engaging and immersive experience here that I wish that every other visual novel could accomplish. The general experience is akin to getting a great book that you just don't want to put down, which is a feeling I often look for in visual novels. That being said, Root Double has its share of issues. One of the main problems is that Root Double has a consistent story with an inconsistent experience. Many of the criticisms that one may have during their playthrough of Root Double often can contribute to some payoff later. Another would be its confusing presentation. For example, the second route is mostly slice of life, but flip-flops between two different timelines, one past and one present. In the context of experience, the best way to do this would be a linear chronological experience that is consistent. Still, they did this back and forth because they wanted to execute a specific plot twist. The twist was fantastic, but I felt like they could have managed it better in a way that did not compromise on the experience. Another aspect that was also irritating was the literal exposition dumps in the form of class lectures on common knowledge topics like nuclear radiation instead of the elements that the writers made up. Those explanations on aspects like BC, a mechanic that the story revolves around, are also irritating though because those break the suspension of disbelief. The game aims to portray a realistic world, but some of their science comes off as nonsense, and how they time their events in history doesn't always work out. These issues won't ruin your experience, but can definitely take you out of the immersion. Root Double's gameplay is primarily through the Census sympathy system, which integrates trust into your decision-making process. There's a little circle in the top right corner when you need to make a decision, and when used, you need to dial a sense value on a slider based on how much you trust each character and how much emotion and awareness you think the characters need to have. While doing this, you also need to consider the importance of the decision, which is indicated by the color of lines, with blue being not that important, yellow being caution, and red meaning a life or death situation. That being said, while it's well integrated into the story, it is essentially a glorified and overly convoluted choice system that can be a bit frustrating. This is due to some fundamental flaws with the system, attributes that make it unclear what you're doing. You're just picking a value from min to max, and all of the values are thrown into one slider. You never have any idea what it does. It's inconsistent at times, combining senses, emotions, and trust into one system that is impossible to know what any of it does. This system may seem cool from a story perspective, but it's another example of the narrative over experience. Well, it kind of is, given that you can play through any given route with regular decisions after you finish it, and that experience is much better. The route structure of Root Double is worth mentioning, as the story is built up into 5 separate routes, Route A through Route E, all in a linear fashion. They build up to a satisfying conclusion, but make sure that you start from Route A even though the game gives you an option to start from Route B. Each route has a bunch of its own bad ends, which are honestly all quite engaging and worth playing through, so I highly recommend you check them out. The bad ends rarely take that long, and you're often shown how to fix your mistakes right after. So even though the weird system choice might be frustrating, the gameplay portions don't hinder the overall experience that much. Root Double has a great presentation, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It looks objectively nice with everything appearing sharp and clean, and it's aged quite well since its original release in 2012. Still, I'd be hard-pressed to say that this is overly impressive because of its simplistic style. Root Double represents the atmosphere and setting well, but the visuals really don't stand out in the game. The sound follows the same philosophy and manages to do its job, but also doesn't stand out much. I do have to mention the Switch port. It's great and probably my new favorite way to revisit this game. It looks as nice as the PC version, looking great both docked and in handheld. On handheld mode, one thing I do have to mention is that the touchscreen works to progress the story, which is something I really like to see on Switch visual novels, but often isn't there. The only really annoying thing about the Switch port is that the button mapping is bizarre, Y opens menu for example, and it took me a while to get used to. Root Double Before Crime After Days is an engaging sci-fi fiction visual novel that I'd consider a must-play title in the genre, and the Switch version has become one of the best ways to experience it in my opinion. There are small things that keep this game from true greatness like confusing gameplay, suspension of disbelief breaking, and exposition dumping, but with its compelling narrative beats, engaging writing, and creative concepts, you'll find it difficult to put this one down. Noisy Pixel is giving this an 8.5 out of 10, and this has been Noisy Pixel signing off. If you're interested in more information about this game, please check out the Noisy Pixel website where I have news and a more in-depth written review. If you're interested in content like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified about our future content, and have a great day.